Started off as a PG podcast, but then Devin just kept on dropping shits and fucks, and now...
That's right. We are live.
The ghost faced himself, Brandon Tanev.
This isn't like the start of last season when it was just, it looked like the Canucks were just a beer league team not playing defense at all. And just before Chris goes, no, I'm kidding, Chris, you can actually go now.
No, hold on.
We had to give more time for coming on late. So.
I still had, hold on. All right. Chris, go, and then I got something else to say at the end.
So, an elf and a midget in 2 back-to-back games. He's definitely on a friendship tour for sure.
Saying, oh yeah, I'm okay with him being, the 6'7" defenseman. No! He is a AHL defenseman right now.
Look, Shonky, don't mind Devin, okay? We all struggle with Devin, so you know.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks, Twitch.com Shifts and Pucks. Subscribe wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network. As after good God, it is almost 360 straight days of hockey. It felt like almost literally a year straight of hockey. We finally have crowned a Stanley Cup champion. The Colorado Avalanche are the new Stanley Cup champions. They dethrone the Tampa Bay Lightning. We'll get into that. We have Vancouver Canucks content for the Hall of Fame. And we've got so much more. We've got lots to get into. We're glad you're with us. Hit that like button, hit that follow button, hit that share button, all of that sort of stuff. And greetings and salutations to Tyler. Hello.
Well, hello. It's nice to be back. Just between different things going on. Yes, thank you, Trippy, for that. Just different things going on. Softball mainly conflicting with Mondays, and then so the whole group of us having some trouble getting out a time that'll work for Sundays. So, unfortunately, I've had to miss a few of these, but good to be back with you, Kevin, and Chris as well.
Yes, hello, Chris.
Yeah, definitely glad to have you back, Tyler. I'm doing well, back in Revelstoke yet again.
Nice.
Although this will be my last week in Revelstoke for at least a little while. I'm headed up north. I'm going to be in Hudson's Hope for the first week of July and potentially a week after that.
Fun. Yes, it has been kind of like herding cats lately, trying to get a schedule, but we'll get into that a little bit. Dylan, all excited. The bros are gone. Finally, a productive, non-ranty podcast. You must have missed my Cale Makar rant last week, but yes, as we'll get into. Let's start there. As Cale Makar on, what a week for him. He gets a Norris. He gets a Conn Smythe. We'll address that. But his team, the Colorado Avalanche, dethrone the Tampa Bay Lightning and are the new Stanley Cup champions. As all 4 of you went and picked the Colorado Avalanche. One loser picked the Tampa Bay Lightning, as he raises his hand. But kudos and congratulations to the Colorado Avalanche. They got it done. And yeah, just an impressive, I guess, first of all, just your impressions of them being the champions.
Obviously very deserving. Not often you see the team that ends up holding the trophy, do it with seemingly relative ease. I mean, they had the earlier part of the playoffs. They were against Nashville. That was a sweep. Had a little hiccup against St. Louis. Not much trouble against Edmonton, obviously. And then, yes, this one did go 6 games, but it was there for them in the 5th game, just a little bit short. So good for them. Good for Joe Sakic. Now he's got a claim to a victory on the management side of things, and bringing the Colorado Avalanche back to prominence. They've been knocking at the door for a while, and they've really stuck with a plan and a core and the coach, and they busted through finally. So, that's what a lot of other teams hope to see, that kind of approach being taken, and it paid off here for Colorado.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a passing of the torch as far as elite team to elite team. I'm also not going to discount Tampa. They'll probably be back and pissed off next year. So I fully expect them to, wreak havoc and be right back in the thick of the playoffs. But Colorado has been knocking at the door for quite some time, and yeah, full props to them. I was a little tempted to do play a little bit of all the small things, but let's not get copyright strikes. So,
and any time that a team wins a Stanley Cup, and there's been some guys that have been at this for a long time and have never had the chance to hoist a trophy. I mean, you start thinking about guys like Eric Johnson and Andrew Cogliano, and just being so happy for them, happy for the younger stars as well. But those guys that have been around a long time and maybe thinking that this is their last shot at it, I love those moments afterwards, and it's just getting to see that joy on their faces.
And credit where credit's due, Sean actually did correctly call it in 6 games.
So did Devin. This is one Sean is thinking he's the only one that said 6. Devin said Avalanche 6 too.
I didn't recall that, but then again, Devin hasn't been around, so
yeah. He's gonna have to come on here at some point and explain himself.
Yeah. They're just an impressive for Colorado, just impressive all the way. I mean, they were able to get stuff out of players that other teams couldn't. I mean, the obvious one being Valeri Nichushkin, another subtle one maybe Nazem Kadri. He couldn't. I don't know what Colorado did that Toronto didn't, but obviously Nazem Kadri took his game to another level.
And he didn't get suspended this playoffs.
No, he did not. And good Lord, I mean, the Nashville Predators sure the heck tried everything they could, but they just couldn't. One person, I mean, you talked about Eric Johnson and Andrew Cogliano. Darcy Kemper isn't old, but Darcy Kemper I felt he got a little bit, I don't want to say too much criticism, but, he allowed some iffy goals. But also, I mean, he made that, the one play nobody's talking about is Colorado only allowed 2 shots on goal in the third period. And you talk about all that offensive skill that Colorado had. That save he made on Kucherov, that was when I was like, yeah, they got it. That was it. And he did allow bad goals, but it's when he made the save when they needed him to. I think he got so far. He was much maligned. I'm really happy for him. And I'm really happy for Jared Bednar. Here's a guy that was got hired in a really awkward position. People forget Patrick Waugh left basically just before training camp. And then Jared Bednar took over, 48 points. Everyone thought he was done. They stuck with him. And, that patience to me is I think the way that they handled Jared Bednar is also was a sign of how they would treat players. And I think that's why you saw Nichushkin kind of take a huge step. I think that's why you saw Kadri take a big step. I mean, people are looking back at Devon Toews and it's like, wow, those 2 second-round picks seem like a steal. And I think in a lot of ways it were, but he stepped up his game. Eric Johnson's a first pick that didn't turn out. Jack Johnson, another guy that a lot of people used to blast out there. But they found
Owen Byram had a huge playoffs.
Oh boy. I that's another guy I'm super happy for. He almost retired with concussions. So there's a lot of really good stories out of Colorado.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about patience and how you handle your team. I mentioned Joe Sakic. It seems like a long time ago now, but you go back to the whole Matt Duchene situation where he wants out of there, and they waited and waited and waited to get the deal that they wanted, and boy, did that ever pay off for them here down the road. Often you see teams kind of, I wouldn't say knee-jerk react to a situation like that, but it can bring a cloud over the team of distraction, if you will. You're getting hounded by the media. You want to just kind of get it over with. And sometimes you don't end up with a very good deal because of that. So they're very patient in that regard. And then, of course, patient sticking with the core and the coach as well. And then with goaltending, I mean, that, you going back a couple of years to the bubble puck where they were down to, I think, the 3rd or 4th goalie. still have Pavel Francouz around and Darcy Kemper, and those are not star-named goalies, but they believed in those goalies, and between the two of them, they were able to get those 16 wins that they needed.
Yeah, they weren't the best goalie in the world like the other end of the ice had, but they definitely got it done. While we're still talking about the Avalanche, though, I definitely want to give props to Bednar. I believe, and I hope I have my facts straight here, he's the first coach to win at the ECHL, AHL, and NHL level.
I believe that is correct, yeah.
That is correct, yes.
And then I also want to give props to Cale Makar. With that trophy haul, he is legitimately now in the same conversation as Lidstrom and Orr, which is crazy to think about a 23-year-old.
Yeah. Well, it would have been just insane for there to be much discussion about anybody else for that, in my opinion. I mean, it was pretty evident, I think, after game 3 or 4 that it's Cale Makar's trophy. Just hand him the award, right?
Yeah, I think the betting money might have been on McKinnon prior to the playoffs, but yeah, that Makar was a man possessed.
That's about as easy a call to make as there is.
I think he would have won even if Tampa Bay won. I think I don't know if he would have. I mean, maybe you give it to Vasilevsky, but it would have been really hard for me not to see Makar win, and I thought he was that good.
When was the last time a losing team won the Conn Smythe?
Yeah, that was Anaheim in 2003. Yeah, and it's usually been goalies that have been from the losing side to win the Conn Smythe. So I think that would have been historic, obviously, Kevin, if a defenseman from the losing side were to win a Conn Smythe trophy. But yeah, he stood out, head and shoulders above the rest of the field there, right?
Yeah. I know that I angered Oiler fans, but just it was weird how Oiler fans were quite silent when they announced Cale Makar as the Conn Smythe trophy. I'm going to say it again. Cale Makar is the best hockey player in the world. It is not a diminish on what Connor McDavid has done, because I think right now we are seeing
this comes back, Kevin, always to how do you define best, right? Like everybody has a different version on that.
Well, again, with the Oilers, with forwards, it's easy because we do it with stats. So we got Austin Matthews, you get 60 goals. You get Connor McDavid with 130 points. And they're both phenomenal players. I'm not discounting anything, but you just watch if you're an analytics person, watch what Cale Makar did to Connor McDavid during that series.
Yeah.
One-on-one.
I mean, if you're saying best because of most impactful, I mean, there's it's hard to argue against your point there. I mean, Makar, it was just that Chris said it, man possessed. I mean, it was just incredible watching that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just, and I think it's hard. I think the two things that are really hard with that too is the first thing is it's hard for a lot of us to admit that there's a new number one in town. Yeah. It is, and there is, and I don't think, again, we don't give defensemen enough credit in this league for the ability of what they need to do, and that's to me, it's hard to quantify it. It's hard to me to sit and present evidence by stats that Cale Makar is better than Connor McDavid, but my eyes tell me that Cale Makar is better than Connor McDavid, and I think Connor McDavid is phenomenal, and I also think we're seeing some of the best hockey players that we have seen, like in a collective group, in a long time. Like this is a great crop of talent.
Well, on that point, I was just going to say, like the last couple of years, obviously with the format and the pandemic and the lack of fans, and even for the folks that don't want to put an asterisk on it, they were quite different, right? And then going back before that, I mean, St. Louis was a great story, but Boston has been a contending team for a while. But to get the quality of this Stanley Cup final matchup with the two teams, and there was like, you could flip the coin there. You got one team trying to go for 3 in a row. You've got this team that's been knocking at the door for a while. Just the quality of the marquee value was really high with this Stanley Cup final, and then the pace. I mean, once Tampa was on the brink, man, that was breathless in Game 5. I think they went like how many minutes in a row without a whistle there in the third period. It was pretty entertaining hockey to watch. It was hockey at its finest.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. I guess to before we get to Tama, I mean, the big questions in Colorado now are you got Kadri and Nikushkin. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see what they pay Nichushkin. I think that this is one of those situations where I feel I know Colorado wants to sign him, but the way that some people were talking, he might be up for it. I think someone might be willing to overpay him, but I have a hunch he's going to, I don't know. I think he's going to stay in Colorado. Kadri is an interesting case. Because I still think I think there's been he's made some tremendous strides. I still think he's going to rub some people the wrong way. I'm just saying that in an objective point of view. If I was Kadri, I honestly would find a way to see what we can do to stay in Colorado. I think that might be his best bet, as opposed to going to Washington or going to another place and having this spotlight on him, as opposed to, I think Colorado, it almost was a protection from him, because you have some other people that are in the spotlight. You have McKinnon, you have McCarr. He can almost do what he wants in Colorado, in a sense of like he could just play his game. And I don't know if he goes to another place, he's going to make more money, but I don't think he's going to have the same sort of environment. It's almost beneficial for Kadri to stay in Colorado. He's going to ask for a lot of money. It's going to be tough to do. But if I was Kadri, I would find a way to stay in Denver.
I see your point, Kev, but I actually am going to argue the opposite, in the sense that out of the two of them, I see Kadri probably being the guy who takes the big payday and goes somewhere else and prices himself out in Colorado. Whereas I think Nichushkin had such a horrible experience with Dallas that fit means more important to him. And with the success that he's had in Colorado, that he is going to be more likely to take a hometown discount to stay in Colorado because he's succeeding there. Whereas Kadri has been on enough teams and knows that he can kind of, like, maybe not have as much success as he has in Colorado, but he knows how to play on other teams in different cities already and be semi-successful and still play his game.
Fair. I think Nichushkin will remain in Colorado. Like, I think that they'll get 5. Though, you know who I see leaving, possibly? Mikko Rantanen makes $9 million. And you've got a Logan O'Connor coming up. You've got a couple of other players coming up. You've got to pay Nathan McKinnon. He's a UFA next year. I wonder if Mikko Rantanen is the guy that they get something for. They probably trade for some draft picks or some prospects. Not that they need a whole heck of a lot of prospects, but that's a guy that you can move. You have some depth in that position. I wonder if Mikko Rantanen is the guy that ends up being the odd person out in Colorado.
He definitely feels expendable, especially at that price point.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, but kudos. I was kind of scared though at the first two. I was gonna have to find that Daryl Sutter quote, because I almost felt like the Stanley Cup final would be a waste of 8 days. So, but Tampa Bay made a round of it. Kudos to them. To me though, that just seemed like they were chasing all along. You got Vasilevsky. I thought was outstanding. Steven Stamkos did all he could. I thought we saw a big step from Mikhail Sergachev. I think Victor Hedman was hurt. I don't know if Brisebois announced that, but I thought Hedman was hurt.
I think it was released today, and apparently I haven't seen it, but the headline I saw was it was a laundry list of injuries.
Yeah. They just ran out of gas. But if as a Braden Point fan, they totally missed Braden Point. I think we would have made a huge difference. They did what they could. They just ultimately, 11
and Cirelli, really.
What's
that?
That?
Was a combination of the two of them.
Yeah, him too. They just didn't have the same team. They ran out of gas. They've been through so much. I just think you can kudos to them. It's hard to win one Stanley Cup, let alone 2 in a row, let alone 11 series in a row. And I know that people are a bit mocking them, but I think that they, for what they went through, I think respect is deserved. You could argue how many times, Tyler, they complain to officials about everything. That's a legitimate gripe if you want to go there, but the effort they put in, that was outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
That never say die attitude. I give him full props there.
Well, and I mean that carried them through the whole run, right? I mean, they were up against it with Toronto, and then yes, they had it had it pretty easy against Florida, but tough Eastern Conference final with the Rangers falling behind in that one. So, yeah, I don't know. It's always an easy analysis to just say, "Oh, they ran out of gas," but you know,
but after 3 years of that deep of playoff runs, yeah, I think that's a legitimate argument.
Yeah, I think just the mental wear and tear too of playing in such big games and it's so hard to get it once, never mind twice, and a third time, and then everybody's getting a little older, and yeah, it gets more difficult. And the pace at which Colorado was playing with made things awfully difficult for Tampa Bay, of course. And but yeah, on the point of like whining to the refs and stuff, I mean, I'm not one of these guys that's like I gotta watch and have this like hate factor for teams to dictate what I support or want to see. But for those folks, sure seems like the Lightning aren't well liked anymore. That there's a new kid on the block now, as was referred to here earlier. But yeah, I guess after a couple of Stanley Cup wins and then seeing kind of how things went with John Cooper there in the Stanley Cup final round officiating, they didn't make any new friends, certainly.
Like, you definitely get respect when you win, but you also get a lot more haters too.
Yeah, I mean, on that, I guess, you look back at Game 5, it was a missed call of too many men on the ice, but it's not reviewable. And I'm not saying it should be reviewable, Tyler or Chris. That's not what I'm saying. But I thought how Cooper handled it was partially, like, depending on how you look at it, it was kind of whiny, but it was also brilliant because he said, "You guys just have to look. Just look."
He basically dropped an egg and walked away and let everyone else connect the dots.
The thing was, he sounded very defeatist in the process. Now, yes, they did bounce back and win the next game, but
yeah, it definitely had a postpartum vibe to it for sure.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of knew once it was 3-1. I don't think that Tampa Bay were not in the position to win 3 in a row. No. That's just they just weren't with all the injuries and stuff. I guess the one, if I was to criticize anything, I actually think that there's a legitimate grave of the criticism of Kucherov. It felt. I felt it was very much a criticism that people have pinned on Leon Draisaitl. Like, at times he shows up, he's very good in the offensive zone, but I thought defensively, man, it's just he didn't really put in that same effort. That would be one criticism I have, I guess, of him.
Are you saying Sean needs to defend his superstar status?
Yes, well, he will. Yeah, I'm sure he's watching somewhere.
I'm just taking the shots where I can take them.
Fair enough. And I think they'll need to fix that defense, and they'll have to fix. I don't know how they're going to fix everything, but they seem to find a way. They got Nick Paul to decide on, Andre Palat. The one guy I'm going to give some respect to that doesn't get a lot, and he's going to get a lot of hatred. Poor Corey Perry. I know that people are going to say, "Oh my God, why are you poor Corey Perry?" And I mean, the guy went through 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. That is heartbreaking in and of itself. You do have to feel for him. You don't have to like him. I know that people are laughing at him, like this is the Marian Hossa thing, but
at least Hossa got it on his 3rd go round. But yeah, your heart definitely breaks for him. And even if you have no sympathy for Perry, when they showed his wife on the TV. Just seeing how devastated she was. Like, if you have any amount of empathy, be sad for his wife.
Fair. Yeah. But I'm sure Tampa will be competing for a playoffs where the Stanley Cup again next year. They still have all of the talent. They will find a way to get other talent there. They've got some players coming. They're in fine shape. Don't worry about Tampa. They're still going to be around. This isn't the end of the run. It wouldn't surprise me. I think it's far too early, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see a Tampa-Colorado final again next year.
Oh, yeah.
And I will be here for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to make one comment on Corey Perry. People that know me from Twitter and on this show know where I stand on Corey Perry, and I think he's a turd the way he plays, not as a person, but the way he plays the game. But he has won a Stanley Cup before, so I don't know how sympathetic I want to be about that. It is what it is.
Fine.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And that's kind of why I made the comment about the wife. If you have no empathy for him, at least have some empathy for his family.
Yeah.
Fine. But that's pretty much it. I think with the Stanley Cup final was a great final. But I think now, though, the off season's here. I think there's a lot to anticipate there. I feel like we're still waiting. We'll get into that in a second. But first, I guess the big news that came out of it for Vancouver specifically, even a little bit Ottawa and Finland and a little bit Montreal, is the Hall of Fame. The Sedins are in. Luongo is in. Daniel Alfredsson is in. I think that's also, to be commended as well as we have two other names here, Sallinen as well, and Hanna-Rika Sallinen and Herb Carnegie in as well. Just to even, I would recommend, we won't spend a lot of time, look up Herb Carnegie's career. He was a guy that dealt with a lot of racism. John Bellevue said he deserved to be in the NHL. High praise for Hanna-Rika Sallinen, especially as Cheryl Pounder in the Memorial Cup. She was outstanding. So I think high praise to her. Look up her history as well. And really, Daniel Alfredsson, I know that there's probably going to be some people that don't feel he should be there, but he's on my Mount. He's definitely on the best Ottawa Senator of all time. He's the face of the franchise. He's been a class act in this league for years. He won a gold medal. I think he's well deserving to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I would have a tough time arguing him not being in the Hall of Fame, which we'll have a discussion about this in a second, but it's hard to keep Daniel Alfredsson out.
Well, he was a crusty player too. Lest we forget the time he ran Darcy Tucker from behind into the half wall and then scored right after when there was no call and all the fans in Toronto were losing their mind. Can
you imagine if there was Twitter when he did that?
Yeah, and then didn't he deliberately shoot the puck at somebody against the Ducks in the final in 2007?
Yes, he did. I think he shot it at Pronger.
I feel like it was Pronger.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
he had a little bit of edge to him. I know. Also Olympic gold medalist in 2000.
I would have shot it at Pronger too.
Yeah. The Olympic gold medal, I think, is what tipped the scale in his favor of getting in, and we've seen that quite a bit, including in this Hall of Fame class with Luongo and the Sedins. So that would have helped. It does make you wonder what it's going to take for Alex McGillney to get in. But all of them I think are very deserving, and definitely feeling pretty proud there yesterday with the announcement and being a Canuck fan, and in one induction class just to have three Canucks from the greatest period of success in the history of the franchise, and for them to all go in together, and it's great for them, it's great for the fans, it's something for Canuck fans to hang their hat on. It's talking about the Hall of Fame. It's not championship hardware to be parading around, but it's something, and little something positive in the off season here before we get into debate and trades and free agent transactions again.
It's definitely a feel good story to be a Canucks fan, and I'm no Hall of Fame historian here, but has there ever been an induction class that's been this one team heavy? Did the 80s Oilers have something like this as far as Hall of Fame inductees?
Kev?
No. Because they all didn't retire at the same time, within the same time period. Because, Messier, when did Messier retire? Because he went to Vancouver. Okay, he went to Vancouver. Then after Vancouver, he went back to the Rangers. And he retired after Gretzky, didn't he? He retired a couple years after Gretzky.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and then Coffey retired. I don't think that he retired I want to say 95. So that would have been 2000. I don't think they all did it. They all didn't go in at the same time.
Yeah, I don't want it to be a rabbit hole, but basically the point that I'm trying to ask with that question is like it's definitely a feel-good story to have 3 players from the same team from the same era be inducted together. So that's exactly why I switched my hat.
Roberto talked about that yesterday, how excited he is about going in with a couple of great friends of his as well.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about the Sedins, so I don't know how much more that we can add to this conversation. But I guess with Roberto Luongo, we haven't talked much about him. We haven't spent that time that we have with the Sedins. I mean, our first podcast was about the retirement of the Sedins, so we've talked enough about the Sedins. I feel like I don't know what else to say there in terms of their career. Luongo, I almost feel like with Luongo, there's still a bit of a, like with the Sedins, there's 100% pure love and respect for the Sedins. I still feel with Luongo, there's still a fraction of Canuck fans he still rubs them the wrong way for whatever reason. He didn't get them the cup final. He didn't get that Stanley Cup.
The Pavel Bure treatment, if you will.
Yeah, sort of that. Like, to me, Bure and Sedins are part of my Mount Rushmore. I think to me, those are the 3. Luongo is debatable at that end. Like, I mean, I think he's close, but there's a lot of people that it still rubs, whatever it is, Luongo rubs them the wrong way for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I'm going to do another, I see where you're coming from, but I'm going to disagree with you, Kev. I think that there's actually a stronger case for Luongo to be a first ballot Hall of Famer because he's second all time in wins, and then fourth all time in wins, and then second only behind Brodeur in I think it was
games
shots faced. There's 3 categories where he's only second behind Brodeur. So he's an all time great as far as goalies, and typically goalies have a hard time getting into the Hall. So I think for him, that's an easy shoe-in first ballot for me. Whereas I can hear arguments that the Sedins don't have this. If you compare players that have the same level of stats as the Sedins, that a lot of those guys don't get inducted into the Hall of Fame, or at least very borderline. Mm-hmm. But for me, the subjectivity part of this, because obviously the Hall of Fame inductee committee or whatever they're called, it's very subjective. It's about the opinion of 14 or however many people, and if they can all agree to get a consensus. But what makes the Sedins get in on the first ballot, I think, is because of their innovation and their uniqueness and their overall impact, lasting legacy on the game. Because possession and the focus on possession, I think, is something that the Sedins really kind of changed the game with. And to me, that's the reason why they get in. But to me, it's not as shoe-inable as Luongo.
No, I think, Chris, you hit it all on the head there with all of that. The Sedins, it does become more subjective when you're trying to measure, impact on the game. Did they change the game? Can the evolution of the game, can that story be told without mentioning them? And so based on those reasons, there's a uniqueness there as well. Twins that came in and played their whole career with the same team, on the same team. So there's a lot of other factors beyond the wins and statistics that got the Sedins in there. But Luongo, I mean, in terms of his resume and numbers, fourth all time in career wins, and it's Roy Brodeur and Marc-Andre Fleury in front of him, and all 3 of those, Flowers going to be a Hall of Famer as well. So it's pretty. I think it was a pretty slam dunk with Luongo for sure.
Yeah, no, that's not. I don't think that I don't have a dispute of Luongo getting in the Hall of Fame. I do think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I think maybe the words recapture still linger with Roberto Luongo, and I guess it depends on who you want to put the blame on for that. It's ultimately Gary Bettman's fault, but is that Mike Gillis's fault? Is that Roberto Luongo's fault? Part of the Luongo legacy is my contract sucks and they couldn't trade him when they were trying to. Mm-hmm. But the other part of this is Torts benched him for that Heritage Classic game against Ottawa as well. I mean, the guy gave everything he could in Vancouver. He really did. I struggle to see that hatred on something that I don't think even cap recapture is fault. To be honest with you, I think that's just a stupid rule, or what we might call, what Gary Bettman doesn't want to say, but is what is called a loophole here that Luongo has been forced into.
Has any other player actually been caught in that as far as having a cap recapture penalty? Like, there was other players who signed similar deals, but I don't recall anyone else kind of having that fee or fine or whatever you want to call it placed on them like it has been with
I think in most cases those guys either they haven't retired like some of those other guys.
Well, I think Nashville is about to get into that with Shea Weber with that contract as well. I think they might be getting some cap recapture penalty with the Shea Weber contract.
But he hasn't retired either. He's now a Las Vegas Golden Knight?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the thing.
He's getting Sean Prongert.
There you go. Yeah, just going back to the point, Kev, about, maybe where Canuck fans are with Luongo and his legacy and, bad taste in the mouth over 2011. I think as time's gone on that, there's more and more people that have reconciled it and realized Luongo is, in terms of pure ability, the best goalie the Canucks have ever had. Yes, they do have they do have a great one now in Thatcher Demko, and his predecessor was pretty good with Jacob Markstrom as well. And then, of course, Kirk McLean deserves his due. But Luongo's the best goalie the Canucks have ever had, and that's been proven, for a while now. And once he got on the Strongbone One Twitter account there, he started to, I think, change some lines in terms of his personality and his his desire to win and win as a Vancouver Canucks. So I there might be those people that are still bitter, but geez, I mean, it was also over a decade ago too. So for those folks, the message would be it's time to get over it.
Yeah,
in the same way that fans got over Bure with time heals all wounds, and we eventually retired his number in the rafters. And actually, that's a good transition in the sense that now that he is officially retired and he's no longer on the books as far as cap recapture penalty, and now he's in the Hall of Fame. When are they going to retire his number? Because you can't put him in the Ring of Honor anymore. And sure, some people might say that might disrespect Kirk McLean because Kirk McLean's in the Ring of Honor. But like Tyler just said, he's an all-time great. He's the best goalie that they've ever had. He deserves to have his number in the rafters.
Why can't you put Luongo in the Ring of Honor?
I think because of how good he was and the fact that he's a Hall of Famer, you can't just put him in the Ring of Honor.
I see. Okay, I'm like, I thought... Right. What I heard you say is you can't put him in the Ring of Honor anymore. Sorry, I was like, what? No, he should be in the Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I mean,
he deserves to have his number retired. Is my or not? Yeah, you get my point.
Yeah,
I mean, Bure and the Sedins have their numbers retired by the Canucks and their Hall of Famers. So, it'll be interesting to see how they handle that one. But I don't think you can worry too much about what Kirk McLean thinks about that.
And I think that was more just an argument that I've heard online and on the radio and whatnot. But realistically, I don't think Kirk is going to argue. I think he's being like, no, he deserves to be up there too.
I mean, it's already getting to be a pretty big group, in my opinion. But that's a kind of a debate for another time, I think. But Luongo has the same credentials now as Pavel Bure and the Sedins, and those credentials are stronger than some of the others. Guys who have had their jersey retired. So.
Yeah, but I guess you do make a good point, Tyler, in terms of like, I'm not trying to dismiss Alex Burrows here, but just hear me out when I say this. Alex Burrows is not going into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and yet he has Ring of Honor. I mean, there's a few players that do have that Ring of Honor, but then you have your Bures, Sedins, Luongo is sort of the greatness. It's almost like you almost need to put some sort of other level there.
No.
Or something, or not another level, but it's almost like there's almost something needs to be done that's a bit more like that recognizes the Sedins and Luongo in a higher way than a Burrows, if that makes sense.
But that's why you retire the number. And like, I understand where Tyler's coming from as far as like, it might be getting to a large group of retired names and numbers already. But the whole reason why the Ring of Honor exists is they wanted to honor players that aren't up to that echelon, that tier of guys that get their numbers retired.
Yeah, no, the system of retired jerseys and a Ring of Honor, I think works. But, it's always very easy to just start making big declarations about who should go on what. But at this point, I mean, if Luongo's going anywhere, I don't know how you can put him in the Ring of Honor when you've got some other Hall of Famers that have their jerseys retired.
Yeah. There's a huge rabbit hole we can go down. I mean, Kevin BX is going to come once he signs that 1-day contract and retires. The Canucks, some are going to want him in the Ring of Honor. Some are going to want Ryan Kessler there. I mean, at some point, when or if Alex McGillney gets into the Hall of Fame, there's going to be some Canuck fans that want to honor him as well. Which those are other things as well. And I don't know. It's an interesting question of what to do in terms of the legacy there. But I agree with you. Luongo's the best goalie of all time. I wonder if this is about
like Canucks all time. You mean?
Yeah, Canucks.
Yeah, the best Canucks goalie. Yeah, best goalie. Yeah, best Canucks goalie of all time is Roberto Luongo. I agree with you there.
Yeah,
but I wonder if part of the discontentment or dislike is he's. You look at the Sedins, they're homegrown. Trevor Linden, homegrown. Pavel Bure, drafted original Canuck. Burrow's an original Canuck. Luongo was a trade acquisition. And then do you think that plays into this?
No.
I think I would maybe hear that argument if he wasn't so dominant in his stats that makes him the best Canucks goalie of all time. Like, if he was just another goalie in the list of goalies that the Canucks have had, sure, but he's number one in several categories.
Well, and he showed up and in the first year turned the franchise around.
We were a goalie graveyard before, Lou, and he basically stopped that graveyard from existing. Mm-hmm. We have had nothing but a string of decent to solid to amazing goalies since.
Yeah, that's where do you put that Luongo trade in terms of all-time trades within the Canucks? Though it was Luongo for Bertuzzi, if I'm not mistaken.
I think there were some other pieces, but those are the two primary pieces there. Yeah, I mean, Naslund for Alex Stoyanov, that's probably number one on the list in terms of lopsidedness. But there's been some big trades that have gone wrong for the Canucks the other direction as well, right?
That sounds like a excellent topic for a off-season podcast.
Yeah,
there we go. We'll there we go. In terms of just a couple of other McGillney, I think that's still a miss. I don't get it. Rod Brindamore, another one I think that people are wondering about that didn't get in. Mm-hmm. Anybody else that is there anyone else on this list?
I don't have sort of a full sense of who was eligible, so
I'm kind of in the same
spot with that one. Although those are a couple of names I've heard thrown around.
Though I think on the TSN they threw Dion Phaneuf in there. I'm sorry, no.
Yeah, I don't think his impact on the history of the game. I don't know. I'd have to look at that one further, but I'd probably not.
If there was a Ring of Honor echelon for the Hall of Fame, maybe, but Hall, no.
And then I guess the other one, Summer. I don't think Theoren Fleury is ever going to get in. I just think his political comments are just that's too touchy of a subject for people, and I don't think he's ever going to get into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, well, there's a good case to be made based on his play, but when you're somebody that's like a bit debatable, you're not going to do yourself any favors being so outspoken like he is.
Yeah, it's hard to see them giving him the benefit of the doubt when he's that divisive away from the rink.
Yeah, and I also do think, I do agree with Haley Salvian. It would have been nice to see a few more Canadian women. Jen Botterill, Cassie Campbell, Pascal, a couple of those. It would be nice for them to get in as well. But, it's a good class, and we still have some catching up to do on terms of players that are missing, and hopefully they rectify that.
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah. The other Canucks news was there's a bunch more people in management now, and a bunch. So Ryan Johnson's now assistant to the general manager.
He's our Dwight Schrute.
He's Dwight Schrute. Yes, I believe. Yes, he's got the glasses, and it's like he can correct people as, oh, you're assistant to the. No, I'm an
If
assistant.
he doesn't dress up as him for Halloween, I will be disappointed.
Yes. Yeah, there should be a picture with Patrick Alvin as what the
Michael Scott.
Michael Scott, and then Ryan Johnson as Dwight Schrute, and then they should do some sort of office thing there. But they did add some other people in. Scott Young, Dylan Crawford, also in as well. So they're adding more. The controversial one. Let's address the elephant in the room. Dale Talon is part of the scouting staff of the Vancouver Canucks. Yeah. Okay, let me begin here. I don't like. I'm. He was let go because of a racist comment. Apparently, the NHL said that cleared him of all of those allegations, and I'm not saying that the NHL is right or wrong. But also, maybe where I'm struggling a little bit is I don't know what he did.
I don't really know enough about that situation to really have a strong opinion either way. I guess the only comment that I really have about Talon joining the Canucks staff is it's kind of cool that wasn't he an original 1970s Canuck? Yeah. So it's kind of cool that he kind of gets to come home in that sense. But that's about the only opinion that I have about Talon joining the staff.
I just, you guys kind of know where I stand. I'm not. There is a point where people just simply are disqualified because of certain things that they've done or said in the past. But at the end of the day, they still need to get the best people in there to put the best possible team on the ice to win a Stanley Cup, and that's what they're going for here. And Patrick Alvin, defended the hire on that basis.
And it's not like he's put in a position of prominence. He's just basically another voice in a room as far as like, hey, have you seen that guy?
Yeah. I mean, if it was someone like Joel Quenneville, I'd probably have a little bit more of a ooh. But I don't know about what is really going on with Dale Talon. I don't know if we know the whole situation. Like, did he say something awful? I don't know if he did or not. That's part of the problem with that. So, is there? But I guess maybe the big thing here is before it just felt like it was Jim Benning and John Weisbrod that was running the whole show, and now there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of people doing a lot of different work. And I mean, it seems like a pretty full roster. I don't think they add any more. Do they add any more? Or is do I submit an application now?
At this point?
Yeah, I mean, we forget Rachel Dory's on the staff.
Yeah. Are they going to need to build more offices if they're going to hire more people?
Time to renovate.
I would imagine this is the end. I mean, geez, the draft is coming up just around the corner here, so I imagine they probably filled it out to the extent that we're going to see it.
Yeah, and to me, I guess it's hard. We'll have to see the results of this team and where it is going forward to see if these are good hires or not. But it's probably fresh faces, fresh ideas. Even with Dale Talon, if he gets out of line, sounds like there's enough people in this staff that will put him back in line. I do not imagine that Emily Casson-Gay, Cami Granato, or Rachel Dory or any of these people will put up with a lot of crap either way. So it sounds like they've built a pretty diverse team. I also think you need to give Jim Rutherford a bit of a benefit of the doubt that he's, even though they said that they didn't do, or the wording was is they spoke to the NHL. I'm assuming that Jim Rutherford has done his own investigation on what happened with Dale Talon. He seems like a really intelligent guy that would do that. So maybe I just feel like, I guess for me, my thought is let's see what the results are overall before we bash or compliment this group.
Yeah, just reading a Province article here just to clarify this. So after he left the Panthers, his contract was due to expire, and he and the Panthers agreed to mutually part ways, so they didn't renew his contract. So after he left, allegations emerged that he had used, quote, racially charged language during the playoff bubble in Toronto. The league hired a law firm to investigate, and he was cleared of any wrongdoing following that investigation. So for the Canucks, it's a non-issue.
I don't know what else to say on that. Like, it's just, that's pretty much it.
I mean, look, the guy was, was the architect of a Stanley Cup winning team in Chicago. The Panthers are a pretty strong team now. And his fingerprints are all over some pretty successful hockey teams there. And if he's available and wants to come join the Canucks to help get this team to where they're trying to go, I'm all for that.
Yeah. In terms of this, my give a crap level is because I trust Rutherford, just like Kevin was alluding to. And if the NHL cleared him of any wrongdoing and Rutherford signed off on it, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. That's all I'll say on that. But in terms, I think really now I've been sort of waking up every morning here. I think it's just for the Canuck fan base, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's time for something to happen. I think that there's been too long of are they not going to do this? Are they not going to do that? I mean, specifically the name JT Miller.
You just had to bring it up. Eh? you just
had to scratch that itch.
Almost an hour. We almost avoided it for an hour. I was like, "Don't say it! Don't say it!"
Hey, you know what? Word we haven't said in a long time is sweetener.
Tyler's triggered.
Yeah, I don't like this.
No, but what I mean is, like, don't you feel though at some, like, it's just for the Canucks, there was the rush to the playoffs, trying to get in. Mm-hmm. But it's just been so long of just something needing to happen here.
Yeah, but once the Cup final rolls around, I mean, it's just kind of always been like other teams, like you could keep your news out of the way of the Stanley Cup final. We want the focus to be on the Stanley Cup final. That tends to be how it goes.
And with the draft and whatnot coming up real quick, I think you're going to see some news happen in the next at least week to 2 weeks at most before we actually see something happen. Like, it's coming soon. It's a matter of time.
Yeah. I just think it's, there's so many in the league. There's so many off-season questions, but there's so many off-season questions with the Canucks that I think people are just a bit on edge and finally just waiting for something to happen, understanding why it's not. But
that's fair.
And kind of seeing what Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin, and what stamp they put on this team, and what happens going forward.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah,
it's going to be a monumental offseason. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
Well, we know there will be changes. And I guess that's what has some angst for the fans is just how extensive are those changes going to be? Some want major change, but are they going to like that change? There is lots to kind of anticipate here.
Yeah, for sure. I guess let's move. Where are we at here?
We're jumping around on this list.
Let's touch on I think this deserves a good discussion. Hockey Canada. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of going through the agenda. I'm like, okay, what can we move on from? And we got a couple of two good meaty topics here that I want to get into. And let's touch on Hockey Canada, and we'll touch on Hockey Night in Canada. But Hockey Canada has been in the forefront here. The federal government announced that it was pausing funding after they subpoenaed outgoing CEO Tom Rennie and new President Scott Smith about a allegation from June 2018 of a sexual assault involving 8 CHL players. And then now the sponsors have stepped in. Scotiabank announced this morning that they are freezing funding at this point. And Canadian Tire also announced today that they are freezing funding as well. There's more subpoenas, and there's going to be more on this on July 26th and 27th.
Don't forget the government of Canada has frozen its funding for Hockey Canada as well until there's some conditions met.
Yeah, mention that as well. I did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to go back to the testimony from last Monday, that was not a good look for Hockey Canada. Not very confusing testimony. Very shocking how unprepared they came across. And I mean, the fact that this isn't the first allegation, there was a couple of other allegations that were at play, and that they didn't ask every single player on that team to testify. That really is bothersome.
Yeah, to me, that's the real black eye about this, is the fact that they made it optional for players on that team to contribute to this. To me, I would have said every player that was on that roster has to come in and answer questions, and depending on their answers, it might or might not get used in the testimony. But like, everyone should have to at least come in and answer questions.
Just the whole thing from the start has to look like they didn't take this very seriously.
They half-assed it.
One, not compelling the players to testify, and right. So I mean, it's kind of a shoddy investigation in that regard, just at that part of it. But then, Kevin, you talk about them not being prepared to answer the questions in front of that parliamentary committee or whatever hearing that was. How could they be prepared? I mean, they reached a settlement, so I mean, they're kind of like, they really got themselves a mess now once they decide to settle the case out of court. That makes an already shoddy investigation and suspicious story look even worse.
I know this term probably gets thrown around a lot and maybe overused, but they kind of come across entitled. They assume that they're going to get off scot-free because they're Hockey Canada. They're an institution in this country. And they just thought, you know what? We're Hockey Canada. Everyone loves to, basically put their boxing week on pause to watch their product. And everyone loves them. They, happy to give their money to them and that sort of thing. And they just assumed that train was going to keep on rolling. And obviously, they are now finding out that is not the case.
Yeah, I think, to me, though, for me, the fact that Rennie and Smith were not even on the same page. I mean, one said that 6 testified, the other said that 6 didn't testify. They just, I mean, there's a thing called an agenda here. Just saying, get yourself at least on the same page there. They looked so unprofessional. It looked like a clown show. That was embarrassing. But I think ultimately the federal government freezing funding on them, that's 6% of the funding that they get. That really ultimately, even though it's a good chunk of change, it's like $7 million. I think that the fact that Scotiabank and Canadian Tire have stepped in and said, you know what, we're freezing funding as well. I think this is where the real message is going to get through.
Yes.
They are not small sponsors. They put up big money.
And across the sport too, right? I mean, Canadian Tire is not just a sponsor of Hockey Canada, and same as Scotiabank, but I mean they're heavily invested in professional hockey as well, and so those are that was very attention grabbing today, certainly to find out that was going to happen. So there will be meaningful changes. It's just a matter of how quickly they get put in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There has to be something taken seriously here, and hopefully there is. And you wonder positions of people and what happens going forward, and we'll see. I think this is it. I think there's more to fall here. I think there's a lot more questions that will have to be answered before we get to that next step. But, we'll see what happens. I mean, you wonder if someone someone that has been speaking out in terms of some of these situations has been a Gord Miller. Would he say, you know what? I broadcast the Canadian juniors every year, not this year, not with what's going on. I'm gonna step away. You wonder what is next here. So, but
well, I think at this point, what's next is we'll see how these hearings go in a month from now, and based on that, then you might see some more sort of pressure tactics there. But withdrawing funding both from the government level and from major sponsors is certainly going to be a wake-up call for them to act swiftly here. So we'll wait and see. But it's kind of another reminder that in 2022, in an era of social media, in an era of smartphones, the ship has sailed on trying to sweep things under the rug like this. Like that in the past, yes, it just couldn't be documented, and the word couldn't get around to the point where
there wasn't enough
if somebody came forward, they would not take it serious, right?
Everyone's a reporter now.
Yeah, and then when you actually get the real investigative journalists involved, like Rick Westhead and Katie Strang, then here, they're actually breaking stories like this. Rick from TSN and Katie Strang from The Athletic, of course.
Yeah, two of the best journalists, period, right now going today. Like, no matter what industry that you're looking at, they both do a phenomenal job and totally are respectful to what they do, and proof that you still need good journalism. It's not just about what you can tweet on social media. You still need a good journalist ethic out there. That's my soapbox that I'm standing on here. So, there's still a wait and see. I still think there's lots to watch on this. I still feel like in terms of coverage, I still think there's this bit of a standoffish overall. But I think that the Westheads and the Strangs are making sure that this is still part of we still need to talk about this. And as awkward as, as much as we're very excited about where JT Miller and Johnny Gaudreau are heading next, this is an important conversation.
Well, it certainly is, because, hockey's already a sport where participation, there's limitations on that. The cost to get into the sport for a lot of families is prohibitive. It's not like soccer where, it's this easy, it's a great, I think the greatest participation sport, and, the barriers to access are a lot smaller. So then you throw this in as well. What is the long-term effect on the quality of our hockey system in Canada to produce elite athletes that are going to compete for world championships and gold medals out there? And what the game doesn't need is to now lose more kids to something like this.
Yeah, don't lose people like me. I didn't make it past the first year of Pee Wee because my parents couldn't afford it. Jumpstart didn't exist when I was that age.
Yeah, I mean, but now, if they don't nip this in the bud, now now and hockey culture becomes a concern for parents out there, then that's going to hurt even more in a very long term quality of play point of view as well.
Well, and let's not forget, I mean, I think that people have just made this assumption in Canada that hockey is the one sport that everybody's participating in. I don't live that far from a park. I live across the street from a park. There's people playing soccer all the time. Basketball is getting more popular. Baseball is getting more popular. Yeah. Football, is still that's a pricier sport because of equipment, but still there's a lot of people finding route there. And
softball, tennis, golf, go down the list. I mean, there's a lot of other options. Sports.
Yeah. And you can get your athletic scholarship, but maybe you don't get into a professional sport, but what's also happening right now is people are going to college using that athletic scholarship to move on to whatever their career is. And it may not be in a professional sport, but they're advancing. And you're seeing one of the things that's I also think is happening a little bit more is you're seeing the college game grow, especially in hockey, and and I cover junior. So this may not be nice for me to say in terms of junior hockey right now, but it's the college game is passing the junior game in terms of the quality of player. And I think it's in part because because of some of the things that we're seeing. It's just people want a safe environment to play the game. That's just that simple, right?
Well, no, there's if there weren't legitimate questions before about that, there's more of them now, right?
Yeah.
And you could probably make the argument that because those college players typically are going to be quite a few years older than the guys who are playing in junior, there's a maturity level change in those years too.
Yes, there are.
Yeah. And then, that's not to say that there's not problems in college hockey. I'm not saying that, but it feels for some people a lot safer. You look at, Jerome's two kids, Tej and Jade, have went through Rink Academy. So I mean they'll get the junior. I mean Tej will get the junior experience now, but it's interesting to see. It's I think Hockey Canada has it. This is a big wake up call for them about where the game is at overall and what they're doing to contribute it. And you're right, Chris. I agree with you. I think that they walked in with a sense of entitlement that they were the be all and end all, and they got smacked. They got smacked really hard. It's a wake up call for sure.
Mm-hmm.
A well-deserved wake up call, I think.
And it's not apples to apples, but it kind of has a lot of the same sort of vibes that Chicago had when they first got brought into their mess. Like it just felt like they weren't taking it as seriously as they should. And once they start paying the consequences, and they're like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah. Well, there are some parallels there, but this one with Hockey Canada is even more concerning because this is a governing body for the amateur levels of the sport in across Canada, right? Like with what happened with Kyle Beach and the Blackhawks. I mean, that's in professional sports where there's big money and big stakes involved, and so in some ways, I'm not trying to say that it makes it one is better than the other somehow, but like you could kind of understand how the whole Chicago thing could go. But in this case, like for them to just kind of have basically a window dressing investigation to say they investigated it and hope that everybody's going to move on from it. Boy, did they ever miscalculate on that one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's a lot of interesting questions on that for sure. But it's and I guess this transitions into a guy that got himself into some hot water. Let's say it. He still has put himself into some hot water. Ron McLean. News came out today involving Hockey Night in Canada. Hometown hockey is no longer. They are scrapping hometown hockey, feeling, of course, the cost of traveling from city to city with that just wasn't worth it. Cost factor, I think ratings factor. They moved it to Mondays. It still didn't have the same impact as Sundays. I think the idea was a good idea. It just was hard to implement really in terms of when you're in a cost efficiency mode, it just doesn't make sense. But so hometown hockey is gone, but news coming out today and we're expecting some big changes. I honestly, Tyler, we talked about this. Well, we talked about this in the chat. I was honestly thinking that this was the last time we would be seeing Ron McLean. This would be it, but he's expected to come back for Hockey Night in Canada. I have to admit, I'm still somewhat surprised because this is my thinking, and someone maybe correct me if I'm wrong. If you were on the side of Don Cherry in that whole situation, you're angry at Ron McLean because you felt that he put Don Cherry, threw him under the bus. However, if you're also opposed, if you thought that Don Cherry was way offside, you're still angry at Ron McLean because you felt that Ron McLean enabled Don Cherry to say the things that he said. So in a lot of ways, I just feel like the relationship with the audience and Ron McLean kind of in some ways, doesn't it feel awkward?
I don't know. I think it might be making a bit much about that, Kevin. My view on this with Ron is if it's not going to be Ron, who would it be? And when they've made this move before with George Stroumboulopoulos, it was a public relations disaster with Strombo. David Amber would be a safer choice, certainly, because he's, people are used to seeing him, and he wasn't a kind of a guy not covering the sport, being dropped in to host this, this most iconic hockey program at a time when it's changing networks. But I think they don't want to. They're just going to take the safe route here and bring him back, but presumably at lower cost because reportedly his contract was up after this year, so that's why there was speculation about his future. But if he's going to be signed to another contract to do less work, then they can bring him back cheaper. And if the goal is cost cutting more than what the presentation looks and sounds like, then it's less surprising that Ron MacLean is back. I mean, the heir apparent was obvious to me, being David Amber, because he was hosting the late games. But it was interesting to me. I think there's a few changes that we might see at Hockey Night, and if you want me to just kind of roll into what my thinking is there. But it was interesting to see Scott Oak not part of the playoff picture after the second round, and David Amber was the secondary rinkside reporter with Kyle Bukauskas. And it was quite evident not seeing Scott Oak on the ice doing the interviews with the players and the families and all that afterwards after the cup's been handed out. So they have, so they had David Amber doing that. It makes me wonder now, is Ron going to host both games of the doubleheader on Saturdays like before, and David Amber gets reassigned as a reporter role or some other kind of role at the network, and then that makes you then wonder at the next step of this being what happens with Scott Oak. He's I don't know his age, but for him to not be around for the last couple of rounds is interesting to me. And they already have another younger, presumably cheaper Sportsnet reporter in Winnipeg by the name of Sean Reynolds, who was covering the final for them, filing reports for Sportsnet Central. So I have to wonder what Scott Oak's future holds with the network, seeing as they're bringing back Ron, and there's this sort of a surplus of personalities there. What's going to happen to Tara Sloan? That's a question as well. So I there's going to be some form of downsizing, but looks like based on reporting from Sean Fitzgerald in The Athletic today, Ron MacLean will be back as the host of Hockey Night.
Scott Oak, by the way, is 70 years old, I think.
Yeah, and so if his contract's up, it would not surprise me if they kind of do what they did with Jim Houston and kind of do a celebratory great career sort of public relations blitz with Scott Oak, and he moves on.
Yeah, I was definitely getting the vibes of like changing of the guard, coming with more younger, but maybe in a more safer way than they did with Strombo earlier in the decade. But Scott Oak not being there definitely was a weird change. Part of me was kind of the understanding that like if they were going to potentially move on from Ron MacLean, that Scott Oak also kind of makes sense if they basically are trying to get away from the guys that are gray or white haired, if you will, and go for like the Kyle Bukauskases and that sort of vibe. Yeah. The fact that Ron's going to be back, I thought was definitely going to be interesting because to me, like what used to be charming starts to feel more forced now. Like his like random little rhymes or poems or random little one-offs that Ron's known for. Like
it's at the point now that people are doing TikToks mocking it.
Yeah,
that's where I'm getting at. Is like I don't feel the relationship with Ron MacLean is this. It feels just generally like that. I put the Don Cherry thing in there, but let me dig deeper. I feel like it just feels awkward right now
because he makes it that way.
Don,
like it is.
Like I feel like Don definitely. You got vibes that is like okay, he's starting to get senile. Whereas Ron still feels like he's all there. He's just not on his game as he used to be. And that maybe his TV prime has passed him, and maybe it was time to kind of gracefully let him, go off into the sunset. For me, it's the Scott Oak that I found a little bit more like, wait, why? because like Tyler said, like his questions that he would have for players, like whether it was during the after hours or whether it was during the Stanley Cup on the ice and that sort of stuff, like those questions that Scott Oake would bring up and the stories that he would bring up were top notch.
Yeah, and I just think that they can keep
weird.
after hours going with other people, right? Like I could totally see them doing a rotation of Murph, Ryan Leslie, and Gene Principe, depending on which of the Western Canadian teams is playing.
Don't forget DeBrusk.
Games. Yeah, well, and then whoever the color guy is as well jumps in there. I could see them just doing it that way. I mean, there's times this year where they would fly Scott Oake in, as an example, on a Canucks road trip, and the Saturday games on hockey night, and you still have Shorty and Cheech doing the play-by-play and color, but they would then have Murph to basically just watching the game still, on the trip, while Scott Oake was brought in to do the rinkside reporting and after hours. And I think if you're one of the bean counters at Rogers, you're looking at that and saying, if his contract's up, we don't need him anymore. Which is too bad, because I've always been a big fan of Scott, and I don't have any insider knowledge. I'm just speculating here, but from what we're seeing here both today and how the playoffs went in the conference finals and the Stanley Cup final, I have to wonder if Scott Oake's going to be back.
Yeah, I'm just confused because it definitely, the vibe I got was like changing of the guard and kind of letting the old guys go into the sunset vibe.
Yeah. I mean, there's a to me to me, what I would do is I think it's time for David Amber to get the full-time role. I think he's earned it. In terms of that, he's absolutely earned it. And I think that there's if you want to keep Ron McLean, you can keep him in sort of the Brian Williams role. He tells those stories that he's,
but they can't afford that.
I know, but
that's always what ends up being the problem, right? They signed this albatross rights deal, and they can't afford to do that.
But if he's coming back at a cheaper price, like Fitzgerald is claiming that he might, then who knows?
No, I'm just to be clear, they didn't talk contract terms in that article. I believe he's coming back cheaper because if they've worked out a new deal and he's
it's speculation, but
he's gonna come back cheaper, obviously. And then Ron's okay with that, so. They're gonna spare a lot of expense elsewhere in terms of having to take the whole crew around the country to put on hometown hockey. That's going to be an enormous cost saving there.
Yeah, that's expensive, and I think I hope they find room for Tara Sloan. I think she has a lot to contribute. And I mean, I think they found something with Jennifer Botterill and Kevin Bieksa. That's hard for me to imagine that they move on from either of them from their perspective. Yeah. So
yeah, I know. I'd imagine that they're happy with their panel. I mean, to me, the panel's not must-watch television anymore. It was with Don Cherry. It was with the old satellite hot stuff when you actually had like conflict and like really hard-hitting scoops going on there. Remember the days with Al Strachan and John Davidson on the hot stove? I mean, but those were like must-watch segments. Whereas now, Elliot and Jeff Merrick will save some nuggets for the 32 Thoughts second intermission segment, but really it's just not the same thing anymore. These are not must-watch intermission segments.
Although I'll throw in a wrench and say that like I've been more in tune for the panels recently because of Botterill, because of Bieksa than I ever have been. I'm really happy that they have those two and not the Glenn Healy's, the Nick Kiprioses, the PJ Stocks anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, I think we've seen over time, and I'm maybe a little more older school with it, but I think what we've seen over time is, yes, those guys have strong opinions, and if you don't align with their opinions, they're gonna bother you, right? But the controversy around that it makes for more interesting television, and I think over time those voices have been missed. That is missing a little bit.
Do you think Kevin Bieksa is old school though?
No, I'm talking about like I'm from the old school, and that's how it used to be with Hockey Night, where you'd have these very strong opinions on the show, and it made for compelling must-watch television. Whereas now it's not that. It's they're trying to have a sort of a bit of a goofier, more diverse panel, and that works too. But it's not. I don't know. It's not my cup of tea so much, and I wonder, to keep in Ron McLean is a bit of a trying to maybe not alienate the older viewers that they're still holding on to, keep him around. He's easy. There's a legacy with Ron, and they're comfortable with Ron, and yet they are kind of spicing it up with some newer, youthful enthusiasm there, in particular with Botterill and Kevin Bieksa.
I feel like they're trying to keep everyone happy, but at the same time, trying to keep everyone happy means that you can't keep everyone happy.
Well, that's the risk they're taking, right?
Yeah.
The one thing I will say is the best panel all year was the overtime intermission debating the Blake Coleman goal. That was fantastic. That was absolutely fantastic, because you had two people on one side, you had two people on the other, and that was great. I think they're missing is I think Kevin Bieksa and Jennifer Botterill look at the game so fantastically different that they don't let them argue it out. They need to let those two argue. Because I really think that that's where your friction is. And because they're both super intelligent, they're both really smart, they both have great personalities. Just let them argue.
And both charismatic on camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how much do they really want that? I don't know them well enough to know that, but yeah, when you have disagreement in opinions and some passion behind that, it makes for more interesting watching for sure.
Although you could make the argument that because of the spot that we're in society wise, that it would have to be Jennifer being like, Kevin, no, you're wrong because of this, as opposed to Kevin starting that.
Yeah, like if you're a Sportsnet executive, and let's say Kevin and Jen Botterill were having an argument, and then you get some thing floating out on social media about how Kevin was trying to mansplain hockey to Jen Botterill. I think they just want to stay away from that.
That's fair.
The Rogers folks they've always wanted to play it safe here ever since they had to swallow their mistake with Strombo. It's always seemingly been the safe route. All the controversial people have been gone, and it's the safe route.
Well, it's more corporate now. Before, CBC was essentially like, yes, they have some sort of level of privateness, but they were government funded, whereas now it's a private corporation that is calling all the shots.
Yeah.
It's not like it's Sean and Devin arguing. Then they won't stop. I mean, I think that you can put a time on it. I think that there are ways to. I think that they both are fantastic communicators enough that they can make it work. I really, really do believe that.
I just wonder if they really want to. Like Kelly Rudy's always willing to argue. He's not shy. Of course, he's been doing this a lot longer though, so there's that part of it. But a little more sparring between Bieksa and Botterill probably wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah, and
just
I guess
be careful overall.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the other big question, and it's involving 650 and 960. Is the radio rights, I think, are up on both stations, and we'll have to see what's going on there as well.
Yeah. I would imagine that the Canucks, in terms of editorially, I would imagine they're pretty satisfied with partnering with Sportsnet. Of course, that's their
and the fact that 1040 doesn't exist anymore. Like, who's really going to try and take that away from?
Well, yeah, that means then they're going on a station that's not an all sports station, and I mean we're seeing that with the Lions and the Whitecaps, but they're not the Canucks. That's a different deal. Like the Canucks are, they went from NW to Team 1040 in 06, I believe it was. So they could be on an all sports radio station that's going to be talking about the team all the time, and that there is that extra promotion, and then they went over to Sportsnet 650. So I don't know. I think it's probably just still trying to work out the dollars and cents and the length of the deal. Yeah. I would imagine it's going to be renewed.
Yeah, I imagine on both ends they should be renewed, but it's just interesting that they're not at this particular point.
Yeah.
So we'll see what's going on there in terms of that. I mean, and have to just mention to our Calgary friends, Dean Boomer is leaving at the end of the week after
end of the show.
End of his show. 13 years, I believe. 13 years there. Doing the mornings. That's an institution. He's done a fantastic job. Whatever he's going to do, I think he'll be great at. But it's certainly an end of an era in Calgary there for sure. With Boomer in the morning leaving.
Yeah. Now, do we know if this is he wants to go and do other things, or is he being pushed?
Yeah, was it
out?
a him decision or was it a corporate decision?
Yeah, is he being pushed out and he's saying all the right things? It kind of feels that way to me, especially seeing some of the other news coming out of Rogers Media here this week.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I just heard that he's stepping away, and I don't have any other knowledge any other way.
I speculate in the same way you are, Tyler, though. It kind of feels like it's corporate driven and he's just basically abiding.
Yeah, and they're on good terms and they want to let him have a send off with the audience. But it's pretty quick. It's not like he's, announcing like, I'm leaving at the end of this year or something like that. Like it's happening here at the end of this month. Like it's happening.
And it's the timing. Yeah.
Radio is so weird in terms of the way that a lot of people say goodbye. Just let me put a Seattle example on this for a second here. Jake Heaps is the quarterback coach of Russell Wilson, and he announced, what was it, last Wednesday, that his last show was Friday. It's 2 days, so it's just weird. And then they announced today the end of Kiss FM. It's the end of Kevin and Sonia on there. It's sort of weird how they do it. It's very rare that someone gets a send off.
Yeah. It's only the ones that have really distinguished themselves as one of the greatest that's ever worked at that station, or great in some broader sense. But yeah, it's very rare. I mean, there's good reasons for that, I guess, as well. Like if a guy is leaving disgruntled or feeling like he doesn't want to go, then you risk putting a microphone in front of them and having something embarrassing occur. The other thing is if somebody's on their way out, I mean, are they giving it their maximum effort as well when they've already kind of got a foot out the door?
Yeah,
so there are some.
That,
there's some reasons, I guess, that you could look at and say that's why it's like that. But I think
another
Vancouver, it comes down to money.
Yeah, to use another Vancouver reference, they basically want to prevent another Kid Carson situation, right?
Yeah, that was the situation for sure. Yeah, that was something. That was a choice, wasn't it? Is that the best way to put it? That was a choice.
Yeah.
Whatever ends up happening with the Canucks radio rights, though, there will be a new color commentator, as I'm sure you guys have already talked about. Corey Hirsch. Now
focusing on the mental health initiatives.
Yeah, and I don't know if he see the radio rights deal was up, and there's no guarantee he's going to be back, so he decided to walk. I don't know. It's hard to know exactly what went on there, but
don't let Batch walk away like he did Rick Ball, though. Keep Batch.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure the team really likes Batch. I would be surprised if it's somebody else.
Who else are we going to get our lineups from?
Yeah. So,
but one difference, and this, I'm not like just, and I'm saying this based on reputation. Rick Ball would have been on to bigger and better things anyway. Like he was just.
That was just me being salty. I ultimately understand why. That's just me being salty.
Like I would imagine if he wouldn't have taken the Flames deal, TSN would have called him to do some CFL as well. So Ball was on his way to. He's on his way to bigger and better things. That's.
Yeah, and Batch I hope they have a bigger role for him next year. And we've talked about it offline. I mean, Harder Ryan Singh had an outstanding playoff run. Don't get me wrong. He's really grown on me, and I was kind of critical of him in the beginning, but I thought he was great the whole way through. We got to do the Eastern Conference Final with Louis DeBrusk, sounded really good. But Rick Ball, I mean, man, that guy, like, he is like flawless.
Yeah.
Like if he's making mistakes, I'm not catching them. Like and just his performance in that Flame series, and in particular Game 7. I mean, that was just awesome listening to that.
That was fantastic. It really was.
I hope that they can find a bigger role for Rick Ball, because that guy's an underutilized, underrated talent.
Yeah, and that's where Sportsnet's going to have some very interesting decisions there. But yeah. Any other topics that we need to touch on here?
I don't think so.
Maybe Trotz, but that's about it, I think.
Yeah, Barry Trotz decided he is not going to coach the Winnipeg Jets. I guess with Jean Guy here, I mean, we should talk about the Winnipeg Jets here. I think
well, apparently he's not going to coach next year at all.
Yeah, that's
but
what he.
I mean, I wouldn't. I'd forgive anybody for being skeptical about that, especially when Paul Maurice, just recently said he was going to step away for a while. Now he's back.
Although he did step away for a while, just depends on your definition of what a while is.
Yeah, wasn't very long. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Trotz is he's been at this a long time, and he's had a lot of teams go far in the playoffs, and he's getting older, and I take him at his word that he wants a break, but I don't think he's done coaching.
Well,
yeah.
There's also rumors that he's interested in management, though. So maybe he takes a year off and then takes a management role. Maybe he is done coaching. I really am not too sure what his game plan is. He's kind of
or he does the Bruce Boudreau and just waits for trouble somewhere, and then he kind of has more control over the process, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, but when we look at Winnipeg, let's I have some theories. Let me just toss it out. When you look at Winnipeg, I think you have to start thinking you're probably you got to start thinking rebuild mode here. Dubois says he's going to explore free agency. You've got Mark Scheifele. That's it's a contentious situation there. Blake Wheeler, that's a contentious situation. So you're on the rebuild part, and at Barry Trotz's point in his career, do you want to rebuild? I don't know. He turned down the Philadelphia Flyers apparently at $7 million. My theory is I think maybe he's going to see what happens. There's new ownership coming in Nashville. Not comfortable with the new ownership. This whole side other thing, but I wonder if Barry Trotz has some possibility of heading back to Nashville, and that's maybe where he wants to finish his career in Nashville in some way. I just will point something out that nobody, just to speak of TV, Terry Crisp is retired in Nashville. I wonder if we see Barry Trotz do a few studio analyst gigs in Nashville next year.
Yeah, I haven't heard much speculation out there about his interest in broadcasting, but he's a very well-spoken guy.
Yeah.
And that would be
you two are the broadcast experts as opposed to me. So
that'd be one way to keep himself in the spotlight a little bit, but be removed from the rigors and stresses of coaching an NHL team. So it's I haven't heard that, but that's that's possible. I think I wouldn't discount that possibility.
And the only reason I said
that off year, that's something he could do to fill his time, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, he bought a home in Nashville. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
that's where that's leading me to. But
no, I think that's a pretty good theory there. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, it will be. There's still a few coaching positions to figure out here. There's still that coaching carousel there. Lots of decisions to be made there. I'm happy. Go ahead.
And maybe just quickly, the fact that the Hawks hired Richardson.
Yeah, I was just about to go there. I'm happy for him. He's been through a lot in his own life with mental health and a lot of situations. He deserves a head coaching job. Unfortunately, I think it's a tough head coaching job because I don't think Chicago is going to be good for a while. And he's in what I call the Charlie Montoyo era point here of he's in this rebuild, but I think like when it gets to the next step, it's going to be someone else. But I really hope he does well and that he does get another opportunity.
Or maybe a more recent reference, he's getting Ducharmed.
Well, I mean, they did a full house cleaning there, so
that's fair. That might be a little harsh, but you get what I was kind of going for there.
Yeah.
Dallas Eakins, maybe.
Yeah. Like I said, you guys get what I'm trying to say. You're picking up what I'm putting down.
Yeah. But yeah, that I think covers quite a meaty episode of the Shifts and Pucks podcast. I think we did. Tomorrow we're back. Sean and I will be interviewing Derek Neumeyer as the NHL draft begins. Some very interesting things going on. The Bob Fathers scout said Yuri Slafkovsky, by those that are watching, this much is the number one pick. There's some people having
listening less than a centimeter.
Yeah. There's some having Logan Cooley as number one. So we'll have that. There's a lot of other names that are very interesting involving the Vancouver Canucks. So we'll talk about that. The Memorial Cup final is also tomorrow with Hamilton and St. John. So we'll get into that. Then we've got a new baseball podcast on Area 51. Cap Space Andy Hodgson and Jonathan Hodgson and I have started a podcast called Out of Left Field. We'll be talking Blue Jays. We'll be talking baseball. We'll try to bring in some other people as well, but planning to do that weekly. And I'm going to be writing some Calgary Flames content on the Area 51 Sports Network. They don't have a lot of that, and I feel half qualified to write about the Calgary Flames.
I mean, you cover them on here, so
yeah. I mean, your set is basically 50% one, 50% the other team, and
yeah, I mean, they have 82 podcasts that cover the Vancouver Canucks, so maybe some other, maybe we bring in a different, I don't know. So, yeah, be busy doing that, and we are planning. I mean, this is sort of, we're still in the working plan on this, but the plan is to move to Sundays for the summer. So Tyler can join us more regularly. Baseball balls on Mondays for Tyler, so it's tough for him. Devin has a very busy schedule. We joke that where he is, but he's been super busy.
Yeah, he's been traveling around too.
Yeah. I want his jet plane, and Chris wants to be at home as opposed to Revelstoke or Hudson's or wherever he is in BC. And
basically, I want to build my Canucks set behind me again.
Yeah.
So I can at least do that if we're doing it on Sundays where I'm actually back at my home base in West Kelowna.
Yeah. And I imagine even for you, Chris, it's tough that you're scrambling to travel. I mean, you scramble to get joining the podcast on time too. So we're trying to make this, we want to bring everybody back together for the summer.
I mean, to throw a little shade at Devin, I at least get here, relatively on time. But yes, I am rushing.
Making an effort at least.
Yeah, I definitely am rushing to get home from the work site and get showered before I can actually make it on here. So it's always a bit of a scramble. But yeah, I do my best to get here.
Just speaking of Devin, very quickly, thank you, Devin, for getting all this work. We didn't talk about this earlier. We got these new hats. Just Shifts and Pucks podcast, and then they're actually customized. Just got the Canucks logos there on the side. You can see it there.
We did cover this last week when we first rocked them, but yes.
So thank you, Devin, for the hat and sending it up the terrace.
You have the Flames on one side, the Canucks on the other.
Yeah. We miss you.
Thank you, Devin.
I know we joke around on here, but we miss you dearly, Devin. So come back.
Yeah. Yes. Well, Tyler, you missed it last week. I said follow Tyler at TNOBLE. Get your ass back here. Follow Devin Gordhow09. Get your ass back here. So
appreciate that very much.
Yeah. Well, I think even Jean-Guy misses Devin a lot, and even Dylan misses Devin. So yeah. So everyone's missed for sure. Yeah. Well, we'll leave it there. How do we follow you?
I'm on Twitter at TNoble, TNOBLE.
I'm at Schneids on most social media.
Devin, get your ass back here. Gordhow09. Sean, get well soon. Beardy Canuck 03. I am KAVOLE. Shifts and Pucks, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, wherever you get your audio, as well as on the new website. Area 51 Sports Network has a new website as well. So check that out. Thanks everyone for watching and listening. We're back tomorrow, 7:15 Pacific. Or 6:15 Pacific, 7:15 Mountain to cover the draft. Wait, we're covering the draft. We're covering the draft with Derek at 7:15 someone's time.
just tune in for the
time zone, but yes.
One of either the Pacific or Mountain time zone. So check it out then. Thanks everyone. As I butcher everything, we'll talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.